How are fast casual chains dealing with consumer frustration over prices? Welcome to The Week in Restaurants. I'm Jonathan Mays, Editor-in-Chief of Restaurant Business, and I am here with RB Executive Editor Lisa Jennings. McDonald's and Krispy Kreme are splitting up. We will talk about that. How are fast casual chains dealing with pricing issues? We will also discuss that. Immigration policy may be hurting restaurant sales in certain markets. Later on in the podcast, Joe Guszkowski talks about, you guessed it, artificial intelligence. But first, Lisa, have you had a donut at McDonald's yet?
You know, I actually have not, but looks like I'm not going to be able to soon. Is that right? Tell us what happened.
No, you are not. McDonald's and Krispy Kreme have mutually decided to end their partnership pretty much before it began, frankly. If you want my opinion. It's not even halfway implemented, and already profitability concerns on Krispy Kreme's part led to the company's decision last month to pause that partnership. Now that partnership has been ended simply because they really couldn't come to an agreement on anything that would help Krispy Kreme's profitability. So if you remember, Krispy Kreme basically makes donuts at its donut shops and then delivers those daily to what they call DFD doors or kiosks at retailers. And in late 2022, they started testing with McDonald's at a few locations in Louisville. They then expanded it to market wide. And then I think last year started what was to be a 3-year process of bringing these donuts nationwide. So they would deliver these donuts daily to McDonald's locations. The problem is that apparently people don't go to McDonald's for donuts, and they couldn't sell enough donuts for Krispy Kreme to make a profit from it. And that's what's happened. Really one of the odder situations I recall encountering, if I'm being honest, in 20 years covering the business. It was an odd collaboration from the get-go. It was a 3-year process to implement it nationally. And, you know, the reason why they couldn't do it is because there weren't enough Krispy Kremes, Lisa, there weren't enough Krispy Kremes to serve all McDonald's. And then there are all these logistic issues. And so, they couldn't market it at all. I frankly think that you're just not getting the best quality donuts when you're buying Krispy Kreme donuts at a McDonald's location. You're getting essentially, hours old or however old the donuts are. And Krispy Kreme donuts, fresh donuts, are phenomenal. They're like one of the best things on the planet. Krispy Kreme donuts in a box are Krispy Kreme donuts in a box. And, why get a donut in a box when you can get an Egg McMuffin? And so it really just didn't work.
I mean, I remember when everyone was so excited about this because it just offered that many more points of distribution for Krispy Kreme. And it was really seen as remember when it was first announced, it was like huge. I think the stock price soared.
It was. They did.
But, it always struck me as odd. I mean, you have a donut after a burger. I don't know. It's kind of or I guess it was more of a breakfast item. It's just, It's not what you go to a McDonald's to get, really. I mean, that just as a consumer.
Right. I think some of us, like me included, I saw this as possible. Like, what could they do? What could social media convince customers to do with these donuts? Or, are there things that McDonald's could create with these donuts and stuff like that? Could they make a donut McFlurry, for instance? Could they have made a donut sausage breakfast sandwich, which I think some of us were kind of interested to see what would happen.
Sure.
But they never. You have to get this. You have to get to the. You have to have enough stores for McDonald's to actually kick in marketing. The other thing, let me go back to one of your points. I mean, you remember the early iteration of Krispy Kreme. They couldn't sell enough donuts to have too many of their donut shops back then.
Yeah.
So we're basically back, if you think about this, because Krispy Kreme's first quarter numbers were awful. They were just really awful. Their organic sales were down, even though the points of distribution were way up. and their profitability just plunged 2/3, and their profitability was not stellar to begin with. And we're basically back to where the same questions we've been asking about Krispy Kreme really since they went public, which is, can their business model, can they sell enough donuts to have an appreciable number of locations? And we're basically back to that point.
Well, it also really, as you mentioned, and it's absolutely true, when you can get a hot, fresh donut, when the Krispy Kreme facilities that make donuts are, have that light on, that's a terrific product. I mean, it's great. It's just not as terrific when it's been in a box or when it's been trucked somewhere. I mean, it's a good donut. All donuts are, good to a certain degree, but it's not as good as the hot, fresh product that really, I think the brand name was built on. So it is kind of curious that they chose this model as opposed to, obviously it's less expensive to do it this way than open stores. So it's a balance, you choose one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an issue. And it's the same reason. The reason why Dunkin' is called Dunkin' and not Dunkin' Donuts anymore. And Dunkin' has gone, basically gone into, their success took off once they said, all right, we are a beverage chain.
Right.
Because you can't sell, donuts, I love donuts. And if you had a really good couple of donut shops in a local market, you could do fine. But when we're talking about, I think, a national chain, you just can't sell enough donuts. You have to do something else. And I think that's one of the issues. And they thought that, distributing these things to all of these different areas and becoming a logistics company. So they pay for trucks, they pay for drivers, and these drivers deliver these things to the retailers, or maybe they contract with some companies in some instances. It's just expensive and they can't really do it. So that's the issue. So now shift gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about fast casual prices. Both of us actually did some really interesting things on that front. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you about what you found about Chipotle, but I've been talking to Sweetgreen folks who, for months now, and longer than months, they've been trying to shake off this reputation of having a too expensive salad. Recently their CEO, Jonathan Neiman, did an interview with the New York Times where they were asked about the $16 salad that journalist had just bought in New York City. And so, that $16 number is really kind of getting in people's heads that Sweetgreen is a $16 salad and that's perhaps too expensive for a salad. And so they've been spending this summer in particular really trying to promote or talk about the access points of their menu, that they really do offer more value. And they've had these bold drops through the month of June, for example, which were more along $13 products that were new creative things that spotlighted their flavors. And now there's a new summer menu coming up with some more value position things, and the seasonal menu is coming back, something they had paused last year. And, seasonal items that are going to represent the summer produce. This is when things are fresh. They're talking more about their growers, and the quality of their ingredients and doing things that, I think you can think of another chain that has focused a lot about it. It's food with integrity. They're trying to really exemplify or trying to to communicate that they are offering something a bit better in the fast casual world. And that's what people are paying for. But they don't want to say our salads are expensive because they're better. They want people to see on their menu that there are ways to get in at a better price. So they want to drop 16 from the, salad description. And so, we have some data. We looked at our Technomic has a new price pulse, which collects data from across the country from chains, mostly in the top 100. And it's fascinating when you look at we can look by region, we can look nationally, we can look at averages and compare with competitors. And if you look at Sweetgreen compared with Cava and Chipotle, really their bowl, there's no getting around the fact that they're more expensive, but Sweetgreen actually offers more access points on its menu than I think it gets credit for. You really can get, the delicious things that it has to offer for a lot less than $16. And so, they're just really trying to shape people's value perception here, which is really kind of interesting. And you also have found that people perceive perhaps Chipotle a bit differently too, looking at this price data. So what did you find?
Yeah, well, I think that with Chipotle, it's a different thing. I think Chipotle has had, which you've reported, consumer surveys have poked Chipotle over value. But you look at what you get at Chipotle for what you spend, it's probably the best value in restaurant business, frankly, if you want my opinion. On a per calorie basis, you get more calories. If you get you can get more calories. Now, I think the real thing about Chipotle, by a long shot, is the immense flexibility of their menu. You can do anything with their menu. All of their ingredients work really well together. You know, you go to Subway, you probably don't go to Subway very often, but if you go to Subway, you can screw up your sub. You have to work really hard to screw up a burrito at Chipotle. But so that flexibility is great. But you can make it as you can make it as healthy or unhealthy as you want. You can focus on protein. You can focus on vegetables. You can do whatever. You can really play around with it. And if you want calories, which I think for a lot of young dudes, calories matter, right? I have a soon to be 21-year-old. You have your kids are a little bit older than that, but you have two boys, and they eat and they want calories a lot of times. And from your spending perspective, for about $10 or whatever, wherever you are, so for about $10-12, you can get the same amount of calories. You can get more calories than you would get in a Big Mac and a fries, which is funny. And I actually calculated it, and I compared. So I looked at calories per dollar spent at Chipotle and Taco Bell. Now, Taco Bell, arguably one of the best values in fast food. It's a great chain. This is nothing against Taco Bell, but Chipotle was a better value than Taco Bell on a calorie basis. So it's just a fascinating thing. But I mean, I think back to your point on Sweetgreen, I think with a number of fast casual chains, they are starting to see some real consumer pushback on prices. And we saw this last year with Five Guys. And Five Guys sales really took a hit last year. Their sales were not great.
Yeah.
And I think that you're seeing this issue crop up with a number of other chains, and I think Sweetgreen might be one of them, which is the issue that they're going to have to address. And I frankly think that more chains are going to have to deal with this year.
Yeah, and one of the things that one of the Sweetgreen co-founders, Nick Jamais, made when I spoke to him yesterday was that, part of the perception problem is that delivery, a lot of especially younger kids who are probably on a more limited budget are ordering for delivery, and that those prices are a lot higher. I mean, then you're talking for Sweetgreen about a $24 salad. I mean, it really changes people's idea about what the basic menu price is. They're not looking, at that. They're looking at what they ended up paying for. But that's a problem everybody faces. So that's, kind of an equal playing field, when it comes to all of the brands. I do think we're going to hear more from Sweetgreen that's going to be focusing on the quality of their ingredients and the fact that they have relationships with growers and they have been able to, use local produce. These are all messages that Chipotle had for what, 30 years has been 20 years that probably has been emphasizing. And we're going to be hearing that more from Sweetgreen. And I think that's legitimate to say, when, the young men look for calories, I look for, when I'm choosing between brands, I look for quality. And when you go to some place like Sweetgreen, you're going to get more ingredients and more things that you can't find, even at Cava and especially at Chipotle, much more variety, and I think they're probably all about the same speed wise. Do we all agree that Chipotle, Cava, Sweetgreen are probably all equally as fast in service?
Probably. I haven't done any sort of measurement, but Chipotle's pretty convenient.
Yeah. But. So, this is what they're up against, in this world. But I also, the Price Pulse data also indicates that, restaurants have not been raising prices much. In fact, I think we heard this morning that Chipotle increased its prices more in the first quarter than it had in a while because it had kind of put price increases on hold, which is also kind of interesting. So it felt comfortable enough to do that, despite the consumer pushback on pricing.
Yeah.
I was going to say that there are other issues than prices going on in the world, especially here in LA, where I am, where there's just been a lot of conversation about these immigration rates and the deportation push by the Trump administration. And so we've actually seen that has impacted sales. You wrote about that, Jonathan. Tell us what you found.
Well, we've heard a lot of anecdotal evidence for a while. now from operators, franchisees and some brands. I mean, I think Wingstop in particular was one that was notable about it, which is that they've seen some sales pressure from Hispanic customers. And our friends over at Black Box just came out with their latest same store sales numbers, and they said basically that they looked at zip codes with heavy Mexican born population, so 40% or more, and they found that there was a marked slowdown starting just before the election last year and continuing into this year. So it went from roughly about the same as national averages to 1%, traffic 1% below that of the national average. So what you're getting here is a U.S. consumer that we all know is having some issues, and they're definitely pulling back. I don't think there's any question. And now you're getting Hispanic consumers are particularly depressed. Constellation Brands, the owner of Corona and Corona beer in the U.S., along with Modelo in the U.S., said that the Hispanic consumer is eating, 75% of Hispanics are saying they're eating out at restaurants less often. So it's actually hurting beverage concepts. It's actually hurting beer companies and beverage companies. Coca-Cola said something similar, is that they're seeing a pullback among Hispanic consumers.
Yeah.
Not only in the United States, but actually in Mexico and border communities. And so as you can see what's going on, like immigration policies are essentially depressing a market. That's an immediate potential problem. It's potentially a bigger problem long term. The other problem that could come up is we're going to have labor issues. If we're depressing immigration, I've said this over and over and over and over and over and over again. If you're going to depress immigration, you are immediately going to reduce the supply of workers to U.S. restaurants. That is just a fact of life, and so that is a long-term concern. But there is also a sales concern, which I think that a lot of people didn't think about.
Yeah. For sure. The sales is one thing, but also the workers are afraid to come to work. Here in LA, we've really seen so many restaurants, because the stories in the video out there are frightening. We're seeing people being, jumped on by masked, armed men, beaten, thrown into cars. And it means that a lot of folks are just not even, they're afraid to come to work. They're afraid to go to church. In some cases, they've come to schools here in LA. I mean, so it's terrifying. A lot of people. Yes, this week I was visiting the San Pedro Fish Market, which is a huge restaurant, used to be a huge restaurant on the waterfront here in a very Latino community. And their sales were down 20 to 30%, just for this. They really saw that place was, people are just afraid to come out, he said. And it's really frightening.
I will make one brief comment, kind of tying the last two subjects together, which is 40%. By the way, if you look at their last annual report, Chipotle noted that 40% of their employees are Hispanic. And some of us are actually actively wondering if there is something, potentially a problem with Chipotle. You do wonder if that could be a problem for them, in the short and long term, where because that's an appreciable percentage of their workforce, far bigger than many other companies. So, all right, superb. Coming up after these messages, we will have Joe Guszkowski talking about, you guessed it, AI. But first, ever ad Spoons puts up next.
Keep up with what's happening in the restaurant industry with Restaurant Daily.
I'm NRN Managing Editor Leanne Zinsmeister.
I'm RB Managing Editor Heather Lally.
We bring you a specific look of what's happening in the restaurant world from brands like McDonald's, single unit mom and pop shops, and hot button issues like inflation, tariffs, and more.
Start your day right with the Restaurant Daily podcast every weekday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode.
Hello, and welcome to Tech Check, where I, Joe Guszkowski, talk really fast about one big topic in restaurant tech. This week, what's stopping restaurants from using AI? Look, AI is everywhere. It's impossible to talk about technology without it. But while restaurants at large are embracing AI, not everyone is sold yet. A survey conducted by Restaurant Business and Nation's Restaurant News found that 28% of restaurants are not interested in using AI at all. Their top reason was that they're waiting for others to prove that it works first. Restaurants skeptical of new technology? Shocking, I know. But a significant number also said they weren't entirely sure why AI turns them off, suggesting that many just don't know enough about it yet. Another survey by Deloitte identified several more challenges. Many respondents said risk and governance is a concern, as well as a lack of the talent and infrastructure needed to support AI. They also said they were struggling to find the best use case for it, which is understandable because there are a whole lot of them. AI will come to restaurants eventually because it will soon be baked into every piece of technology they use. At the same time, there's still a lot we don't know about AI, such as its ROI and its long-term impacts. So while restaurants may have a reputation for being slow on tech, I can't really argue with taking a measured approach here.
And that should do it for The Week in Restaurants, which was edited, as always, by Spoons, artwork by Nico Hines. You may find this in other episodes of the podcast on our website at restaurantbusinessonline.com. But by all means, subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For Lisa Jennings, I'm Jonathan Mays, the editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business. Thank you for listening.